Hi, I'm Gareth, and in this video we're going to consider something that's often called an echappee. If you have some kind of English upbringing, you might know this as an escape note. If you're more in the American tradition, you'll probably know it as an escape tone, if you've come across it at all. Now, the echappee, or the escape note, the escape tone, is one of these things that we call inessential notes. And often it's the one that people are least familiar with. So what do I mean by inessential notes? What I mean is using notes that don't belong to the prevailing chord. So this example is in the key of D major. So let's think in D major for a moment. If I've got a chord of D major, then it would be D, F sharp and A. And all the notes I'm playing are either D or F sharp or A. So that means they're all what we call harmony notes. They all belong to the chord. But if I did this, so at the top I've gone D, C sharp, D, then that C sharp is what we call a lower auxiliary note. Or if I go D, E, D at the top, that's an upper auxiliary note. So auxiliary notes are an example of inessential notes. In other words, it's a note that doesn't belong to the chord, because if I go up to E, E doesn't belong to this D major chord. Or if I go down to the C sharp doesn't belong to the D major chord. But they're just notes next door. I'm just going up one or I'm going down one and coming back. So those are auxiliary notes. They're kind of one form of inessential notes. Or you might have come across the passing note or the passing tone, where say I'm doing something like this. So I've got a D major chord followed by another D major chord. So all those notes are D, F sharp or A, but I've slipped in passing notes in between in the top two parts. So in the soprano and the alto part, the note in the middle is passing by step between this and this. And because it's happening in two parts, I can call it double passing notes. I might have anticipatory notes. I might go from a chord of A to a chord of D. All those are harmony notes because all those belong to the chord of A. All these belong to the chord of D. But if I use the chord of A and then I anticipate the D in the melody, so it suddenly clashes with that chord of A, but then it belongs to the chord of D, that's an anticipatory note. It's anticipating what comes next. So these are kind of the forms of inessential notes that, generally speaking, people are more familiar with. So let's talk about the echappee, because there are four things that we want to know about the echappee, or the escape note, escape tone. The first thing is it has to be a neighbouring note that doesn't belong to the chord. So here I've written two examples. So in other words, these notes both belong to a chord of D. These belong to what I think would be a chord A7. And then the last belongs to a chord of D. So if I'm thinking about this chord of D here, that G, nothing to do with a chord of D. So it must be an inessential note. But the first thing is, it's a neighbouring note. So you can't be leaping off. You couldn't be, for example, going F sharp up to B or something. It's got to be a neighbouring note, all right? So it qualifies step one, it's a neighbouring note. It's always, if it's an echappee, unaccented. In other words, it comes between beats, it doesn't come on beat. So you can see that these two notes here are coming in between the beats. That comes after the first beat, second half of the first beat. This is on the second half of the second beat. So that's the second thing. So a neighbouring note doesn't belong to the chord, first thing. Second thing, it's got to be unaccented. It's got to come between the beats, all right? And it's preceded by step from the previous note. Okay. Now, the third thing to say about an echappee is that in nearly every case, it will move up. So you can see I've got an F sharp here, it's moving up to G. I've got an E here, it's moving up to F sharp. So that's what you'd expect the echappee to do. The fourth thing to note about it is that it's normally followed by a leap, nearly always downward. So I've gone by step from a harmony note to this echappee next door, but then I've got to leap down onto the next note. And I've done the same thing again. Here we are using a harmony note that belongs to this chord, this A7 chord. We've gone up by step to a note that doesn't belong to the chord, but then we've got a leap down. So that's how they work. Just remember, got to be a neighbouring note that doesn't belong to the chord. It's always unaccented between the beats, preceded by step from the previous chord. It normally moves up, and after you've done the echappee, we're normally following it with a leap, nearly always downwards. So that's how those things work. So there's another inessential note that you might want to add to your collection if you're writing. And if you're playing music and you're looking at something thinking, well, what's that note doing there? It doesn't seem to belong to the chord, but I can't see what it is. Well, ask yourself if it's one of these.